Welcome to Username Nerd News. My name is Mike Hewitt, and I'm with Thaddeus Nowak, and you've written a series of books. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. The books are about a young woman whose father and brother are off fighting in a war, and she's stuck at home in the castle with her mother, but her mother's been plotting a few things, so she has to try to escape and get out and see if she can rescue her father and brother. She happens to be the youngest daughter of the king, as well as being a witch. Now, I've built the magic in the world to be based more on physics than anything else, but people don't understand how magic works, so they're thinking in terms of spells and curses and stuff like that.
Now, I love the way you've made her a witch. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, tradition holds that a mother who commits a sin against the gods is going to have a child that's born a witch. So therefore, Stephanie is in fact her mother's curse. However, there's another tradition that says that if Stephanie were to die, that curse would rebound against her mother, and since they burn witches, there's a little bit of a conflict there.
Now, did you find that in history, did you find that in mythology, or is that something that's come from you itself?
That was actually something that I just kind of came up with.
That's very cool. I read that, I'm like, that's really cool.
I've heard afterwards from other people that there is some basis of that in different religions and different folklores and cultures, but it wasn't something that I was aware of beforehand, so it was definitely something that I came up with while I was developing the character. In fact, the whole book and the whole character originated from a time when I was writing random scenes about random characters and random situations to try to get past a little bit of writer's block. And I wrote a scene about a young woman stuck in a public house. She was alone in the world, had no money, had nothing, and a fight broke out. She used magic to defend herself, and in doing so, the whole town turned against her, including the person that she was trying to defend. So I just had to figure out who this person was, what she was doing in this house, why she was all alone in the world, and the whole story emerged from that.
Now, I got your book about 2 weeks ago. With all the research I did, it was one of my favorites. And so going through it, Stephanie, I just connected with it immediately. What was your inspiration? Is there someone in real life?
There's no one in real life. However, when I was growing up, my family had the only boys in the neighborhood. So I was, in fact, raised by the neighborhood girls, which is greatly attributed to what I like to read, what I like to write. It's had a dramatic impact on my life. So when I sat down to write this series, I wanted to make sure I told it from the standpoint of a strong female. And so for me, that is someone who makes a decision. Not just someone who goes off and saves the world on her own, but someone who needs people and will make a decision and lead people, and right or wrong or indifferent, will live with those decisions.
Now, you have 5 books in the series. Have you ever thought of going off and writing a one-shot, or do you love I'm assuming you love this series. Are you going to stick with the series? Is book 6 coming out soon? Is it in the process, or are you going to go down another path?
Well, this particular series, the 5 books kind of complete out the story arc that I had come up with when I first started writing the series. So I don't intend to make book 6 for this particular series. That doesn't mean that I won't write something with these characters a little bit later, and maybe another series. I have some ideas for something that might take place about 6 years after the end of this book. But right now I've started a second project set in the same world with different characters, not going to be related to these characters at all, but it is about I'm going to be borrowing some Norwegian and Scottish history and culture, and they're going to be set up in the north, and the main character is going to be living in an occupied country, and she's going to have to figure out what she wants to do about that.
That's cool. That's very interesting. Now, did you always know you were going to be a writer, or when did that come about?
Well, when I was younger, I started writing in junior high, and basically I started just reading fantasy novels. I was consuming them, a novel in a day, and just morning to night just reading. And I thought, hey, this would be a great way to make $1 million and never have to work a day in my life. Knock out 400 pages and I'm done. All right.
How'd that work out?
I'm still here. I'm not retired yet, so but it's been a passion. If I'm not writing, I'm not really having a good time. I get grumpy. No one wants to be around me. So it's better for everyone if I spend time writing. But this series really started clicking about 6 years ago. I changed my approach to writing. I was doing more of a discovery writing approach when I first started, and I switched over to an architect style. And the discovery writing, George R.R. Martin and other famous discovery writers, they kind of let the story unfold as it's told. It didn't work out for me so well. I did a lot of editing and it was cycling around and around and around. And when I switched over to an architect style, a very rough outline, very rough plot points, it just came out. Mother's Curse came out in 2 months.
That is fascinating, because I wouldn't even know where to begin to write a book and stuff like that. Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, writers spend most of their time, well, if a writer is either writing or they're thinking about writing. So there's a lot of mental writing that goes on in my head, you know, if I'm sitting in the car or sitting in line or, you know, things like that.
So what percentage do you think is getting that story set in your mind, and what percentage is actually writing?
Well, for me, I spend most of my time working through, and I'll actually kind of do a total run-through of the whole story in my head before I sit down and start writing. And that might take a week or a couple months maybe, depending, because it's always in the back of my head. But when I actually sit down to write, I can knock it out in a couple of months, because if I write 4 or 5 pages in the evening, or maybe 8 pages if I'm really aggressive, that's a couple thousand words a night.
Yeah.
If I write a couple thousand words every night, and then maybe 5 or 10,000 words on a weekend, I maybe get close to 15, 20,000 words in a week. You know, for a 100,000 word novel, you can do that in about 5 or 6 weeks. So.
What were you talked about reading a lot of fantasy in your past, and you know, we've all read a lot of fantasy, but what was your inspirations? Who, I think I can guess, but maybe not, but who are your inspirations?
Some of my very early inspirations was Isaac Asimov. Not really a fantasy, but on the science fiction side of it. I read a lot of Barbara Hambly. Jane Lindskold is another author that I really like. She's done the Wolf series or the Firekeeper series. There's a handful of others that cross over. David Weber is another one that I've read quite a bit. So those are my primary influences.
Oh, very, very cool. These books, once again, I've read a little bit, but I am enthralled with them already. I mean, they're very good, well written.
Well, thank you.
And the one thing I want to talk about, it doesn't seem as dark, obviously, as Game of Thrones, which it's funny because I sit around and talk and I'm just like, I don't know why everyone's so fascinated with these books. I feel like I just want to slit my throat every time. But it's not as dark as that, but it's not really young fiction. It's not really young adult either. It's just kind of in between. It's almost perfect. So
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I call it a realistic fantasy as opposed to a high fantasy. It's not like the Harry Potter. My magic system's based more on physics. I have a degree in chemistry. I have almost a minor in mathematics. I took engineering physics for the fun of it. 5 hours in the evening. So I have a very rooted scientific background. So when I wanted to tell the story, I wanted to tell it from more of a realistic perspective. A lot of the fantasy artwork that I love, Larry Elmore and those, they're realistic. You know, they're photorealistic type of artwork. So I kind of wanted to make the books more of a realistic approach. So I've avoided some of the tropes that you find in a lot of fantasy, such as prophecy. I'm not really one that's big on trying to figure out, how do I unwind the prophecy to make it work? So it looks like it's going to be this, but it really at the end I switch it over to be that. So I avoid those things just because I don't like to read them. So it's mostly Stephanie setting her own agenda, trying to figure out what she wants to do with herself, how she wants to be able to survive in the world and protect her friends and family.
It's very cool. So now, if people need to get these books, how do they get these books?
Well, you can get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I've got Kindle, so you can get them those places. I go to a number of conventions, so if you find me in person, I'll definitely be there and sign them for you. But primarily online. There's a few local bookstores, like Reader's World and Lee Summit has some copies, and a few other places around have some.
And then how do they get a hold of you and all that? Do you have a Twitter?
I've got Twitter, Facebook. I've got my webpage, so you can reach me out there. I try to do a little bit of stuff on my webpage, but I'm notoriously bad about being able to be regular about posting stuff. I try to, but I'm experimenting with an idea. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to actually do it yet. So, but I have the maps, and I really like maps, but it's not necessarily an artistic map. So I was thinking I was going to start working on doing some artistic maps and doing little bits of information about that area, and then maybe put it on a Patreon or something like that, or just put it on my webpage.
Yeah, kind of like a wiki about the people in this area and stuff along those lines.
And do it more as like an artistic type of a map too. So.
Yeah, I love that. So, well, thank you so much for letting us interview you. I'm loving the books. I'm gonna, as soon as the con's over, I'm through the first one. I'm right on to the second one. So you've got to get these books. We'll have everything on the screen for you to get to them. And thank you. And thank you. Okay, stop. Don't go to the next YouTube video or channel or skip or don't do anything. Real quick, 5 seconds. We have 3 different channels. Please subscribe to them. Username Nerd News, username Nerd Comics, username Nerd Games. We have separated them out into 3 ones. Choose all of them or just one to subscribe to. You'd love it. I promise you, we'll give you great content. It'll show up in your feed. You'll love it. Just real quick click. It doesn't take but a few seconds. You'd be awesome. Thank you.